Hey, my name's Leon. This is The Boost. We're at Geekdom today, and I have a returning guest, a friend, a mentee, all of the above. It's Zac from NonprofitsHQ. We wanted to talk, not like the nonprofit world. I want to get some updates on your platform. It's been about 8-9 months since you launched, roughly.
Yep, something like that.
Okay. So how has it been since we launched? You came on here, you were just launching it just in May, right? So that's a huge time in startup world. Like, I am kind of curious just how it's felt, and obviously I've got some background knowledge, but I find it really fascinating, just the journey and the growth of a startup and a person in a company.
Yeah, definitely. So first, thanks for having me back, Leon. The very first interview where we publicly talked about what we were building and what we were doing was on the Boost there in the conference room at 7:02, right? And that's the first time where we publicly provided details on what we were building and how we were doing it and the stuff that we wanted to accomplish. So it just feels natural, as we're seeing this progress, we're seeing this traction, generating revenue to come back and circle back to the Boost. So definitely happy to be here and appreciate the invite back. There's a lot of stuff happening, not just with nonprofit tech, but in the nonprofit space in general, right? You've got a lot of uncertainty with the new year coming up and how organizations are going to position themselves to be more self-sustainable and to carry themselves through the next couple of years.
And that's obviously the government change, the new Trump coming in. I have heard from many nonprofits, especially anybody in the DC area, that they're kind of scrambling to, one, organize better to make sure that they can do compliance, they can keep track of everything, but figuring out how to secure the money now, from grants to just extra donations, because I believe the stat is going down every year as donations for non-governmental entities are decreasing year over year, which is kind of fascinating because nonprofit tech is growing in the tech space. I've seen a lot of that.
That is a really interesting point too, because money from the public is getting smaller and smaller into the nonprofit space, but nonprofit tech is blowing up. In the last year, there have been over $150 million invested in nonprofit tech from reputable VC firms, right? And these are groups that were scared of nonprofit, never would touch, never go near nonprofit. But as more need is demonstrated and as people are starting to shift their focus, they're recognizing that, organizations need tools to help support what they're doing, to help maintain the requirements, the regulatory requirements, and all of these different things that they need to be sufficient. And so as the organizations are looking for these tools, that market is growing. And we just happen to be experiencing that pain point at the right time to get in kind of the beginning of this large jump into nonprofit tech. And I think that is why we've seen the success and the traction that we've seen just launching May 1st to where we are now. I think that's largely, we just happen to be experiencing a problem that other people were, and we happen to be just a little bit early on that problem to be able to build a solution and be ready when people are starting to see it.
It's building a startup is always a little bit of timing, it's always a little bit of luck, and it's a ton of hard work. And
Absolutely.
And I see that from you is you built your luck. You don't just get the luck. You built the luck. You had impeccable timing, and now you're doing the hard work of it. Now, as all that money gets pumped into it, and the funding for nonprofits are going down, why do you think that is? It's fascinating because I would expect if all of these VCs are putting their money in to say, hey, there's going to be really big exits. Some of these companies will be able to go public. It's a weird dynamic considering it is a nonprofit company that's then working with a for-profit, and then you have less giving. How are these companies navigating that in this world? How are you navigating in this world?
Yeah, definitely. And so what you'll notice, and you can look back, there are statistics, I didn't bring any with me now, but you can look back and see the correlation to the various economies in the world and how that correlates to not just direct charity giving, but also grant sources, because that money comes from somewhere as well, right? And so we have to think about we have to have tools that kind of adapt to those conditions as well. And so the way we're solving it, and every company is solving, these different problems differently, but the way we're solving it is bringing grants to our organization, right?
Okay.
So
real quick, can you describe what a grant is? Because I fundamentally understand it, comes from some government or company, but like, what is it for everybody that's listening and a little bit on my education side?
Definitely, yeah. So grants are amounts of funding. They can be super small grants, $100, couple $100, or really large grants, 50 million, any dollar amount. They come from an organization and they're usually earmarked for a specific purpose. Mm-hmm. So for example, if I have a nonprofit, one of our customers actually in Arkansas just received a grant. They provide nutrition to the homeless population and the low-income population there in Arkansas, and they received a grant to build a kitchen, right? Build a space where they had a commercial kitchen, and they weren't just kind of like putting this stuff together through various different people's kitchens at home, right? And so they had a grant that was specifically earmarked for that. Money that they received from an organization after some qualification process that usually has some strings attached, right? They have compliance requirements. Winning a grant is not the only step. You have to remain compliant with
kind of like a scholarship for somebody going to college, right?
Exactly. So, and a lot of scholarships are grants.
Okay, so the one and the same. Now, that compliance component, that's what NonprofitsHQ does, right?
That's one of the facets of how our platform works. And, what the benefit of our platform is, an organization has the convenience of everything that they need to run their organization smoothly, the management of contacts, staff, donors, fundraising, board of directors, so meetings, decisions, resolutions, all that in one place. That means we have a very granular understanding of what that organization qualifies for, what grants that are available that organization qualifies for, and we can generate a score to indicate the likelihood of this organization winning a particular grant. And so we're tackling this and we're providing this functionality to our customers through grants that come to you, right? Okay. Sourcing grants, figuring out qualifications, writing proposals, that takes a lot of time for our change makers. And they're really dedicated to making sure that their mission is amplified and that they're creating the change that they want in their communities. And they shouldn't need to worry about all of these other overhead administrative type tasks. But granting is incredibly important to these organizations, especially as public donations kind of wither away. Granting sources become a really important source of funding to keep these programs going. And so our platform, one of the really cool functionalities that we're rolling out in 2025 is our platform is always searching for grants and sourcing grants on behalf of our organizations 24/7. And what happens is it finds grants, it checks qualifications. We use a lot of AI models that we train specifically on 20 plus years of grant data. Okay. And we match the organization based on how they qualify. Are they serving the right group of people? Is their operating budget the right amount? Are they in the right area geographically? Whatever these requirements are for these grants. And then the first indicator that our customers get that they qualify for a grant, they have a full toolkit. They have the grant information, they have a score indicating the likelihood of winning that grant, and they have a draft grant proposal right there. So we take out the entire first 2-3 steps of this grant process. So your grant staff, now all they have to do is edit a proposal and submit, right? And so you can submit for and be more specific or explicit in the grants that you submit for with a smaller team.
That sounds amazing, because I know that nonprofits always put somebody in place. That's their full-time gig. That's all they're doing. And to my comparison, it's a scholarship. You got to write something, you got to type it up.
Yep.
I like the blend of AI. I think that's also really good timing-wise. Is how do you use AI? That's an effective way. That's not just like it's a feature check. Like you can
Definitely.
you can ask this something and it'll process some data, or I'm going to write a quick blog for you about this. But it's speeding up that time, and those grants, like, my assumption is you can apply for as many as you want, and I'm sure that there's like a win-loss rate that they're kind of factoring in. Hey, we win 50% of the grants, but that's really interesting as a feature set, because that's how they generate the revenue. So not only are you tool to manage compliance. You now become a revenue generating tool.
Definitely. And so, our goal is to be as impactful with our technology as we can and really help these people that dedicate their lives to doing good, really amplify their impact and focus on their mission. And so all of the tools that we're building are with that in mind, right? And so money and time are two really big things for all of our customers. So we can't just ignore that, especially when we're asking them to buy software from us, right? We have to, I feel like it's our responsibility to also create paths for revenue generation for that organization. So, not only can they afford software to help, keep their organization smooth, but they can continue to run their programs and continue to operate the impact in their community. Not to get off on a tangent here, although I'm going to get off on a tangent here.
We're going down the path. Let's do it.
We're heading that way. You had mentioned that it's a really interesting blend of AI. And it reminded me of this kind of meme that I saw on LinkedIn. And it was an elephant, right? And there was a little snake behind that elephant. And that snake, throughout the progression of the pictures, was swallowing the elephant, right? And the whole caption was, companies that build an AI feature and then call themselves an AI company, right? And so then the last graphic was still the size and shape of an elephant, but now inside the snake's belly, right? And AI was the snake. And I think that really illustrates what a lot of companies are doing. Instead of thinking about the problems that AI can solve for their customers, they're rolling out really quick AI features. A lot of times they're just calling like a ChatGPT API or some functionality like that, and they're calling themselves an AI company. A lot of times that's all you need for your AI features, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But I think when we start thinking about the blend of how AI can help solve real world problems in our products and that our customers are experiencing, that's when I think we get that really good balance, right? We're not trying to replace grant writers. We're a long, long way from AI being able to replace something like a grant writer.
I'm
right?
glad that you're saying that, because I think a lot of times too is there's a huge assumption in the consumer mind of, if AI writes it, it's good. I'm going to kind of push it out. But there is an important part of, the AI is going to hallucinate. It might say the wrong thing. It might pull a fact that's not totally correct. It could be tangentially right.
Absolutely.
But having that human, that grant writer, now be able to do 10 a day versus before they were able to do 2 or 3.
Exactly.
They increase their productivity, they increase their impact. And I really think the biggest part for the software that you have is it's a revenue generation spot. Because any company, no matter where it happens, if you're not a revenue generator, a lot of times you're going to get put on a chopping block no matter what.
Absolutely.
And even with CRMs, it happens. At some point you look at it and you go, is this the most effective? Could I go to something cheaper? Could I use an Excel sheet? Could they roll back? And if you've got those features that are compliance, it's helping them, at some point they might go, but if they're like, hey, we can attribute $200,000 in grants to this, I think it's really easy for those nonprofits to justify that fee and keep using the software.
Absolutely. And, I was speaking yesterday with a reputable nonprofit consultant there in the DC area. And that's one of the things that we talked about, too, because he was like, look, Zach, this is a really cool product. This is a really cool thing. But as organizations are kind of starting to trim down, as they're starting to adapt to this, lack of funding or funding drying up, they're going to start cutting things. And 9 out of 10 times, they're going to cut software, especially,
And that consultant.
And that consultant.
Yes. So there's a pro for the consultants, and then there's a pro for you. I think it's a win-win-win in every scenario. And
I think
rare.
that's how you move forward, right? Your customer or the nonprofit needs to win. We need to win, and the people we're partnering with need to win. If everybody takes something tangible out of the relationship, that's going to set you up for success moving forward. And it's going to help us be more, focused on our product, on our platform, and help us really do something good with what we're building, because that's why we started out to do this.
Related to the DC, I don't want to go too into the weeds of the politics, but I've also heard from many people that in some ways the government kind of slimming down and changing. They're going to outsource a lot of stuff to the public, to the free market and stuff. In some ways, could that also benefit these nonprofits? Like if grants are there, they become government contracts or something, but it could benefit in some ways if it goes that way.
Yeah, I mean, so it really depends on. So there's a lot of things you can predict in kind of the free market, and there's a lot of inability to predict in the free market, right? I think as things become more, I guess, privatized, right, in the way the government and various different entities operate, that probably does create more. So one, that'll create more available money, right, in those spaces, which can translate into purchase services or things like that for nonprofits. So for example, one of the biggest misconceptions about a nonprofit is that you can't charge for anything that you do, that everything that you do has to be free all the time, right? And that's a really big misconception. And a lot of even nonprofit...
That's what I thought.
Even a lot of nonprofit leaders are still kind of under that assumption. And the challenge with that is, you are focused on impact and not dollars as a nonprofit, but it's still dollars in and dollars out. Yeah. You still have to pay your bills. You still have to generate revenue or generate funding for your organization, right? And so while you're more impact focused, you should still operate like a business. But charging for services are ways that organizations can become self-sustainable and not rely as much on their programs. Now, there are going to be instances where that just doesn't make sense, right?
You could subsidize it or something.
Exactly. Right? And so we have a customer in Phoenix that they provide different services to the homeless population, right? So showers, haircuts, food, things like that. So in that instance, it doesn't make sense to charge for that. But what they do is they host a quarterly dinner, right? And it's for people, you buy a plate, it's kind of gala style, and that's how they raise money, right? And so they also have these other programs that they do, like they make these, they're not 3D printed, but they make these little trinkets and these different things that they sell, right? And I think they also have some classes, like organizational classes that they sell. And so they find these other services to fund the actual main impact without being completely reliant on public charity and grants. Now, that's still a huge portion of their funding, right? But if, for example, you could lose a grant not because you did something to lose that grant, but because it's not there anymore, right? And so if you have some other revenue coming in that you control, that you're generating, you can fill in that gap until you're able to replace that funding source.
So in many ways, that nonprofit is a business. It's just
absolutely.
It's got a small fundamental back end difference of like the CEO, like none of that, but it is like you're gonna have multiple streams of revenue, grants. You got to sell some stuff. You got to, generate donations. So there's a path. That's all in the nonprofits. Like even, for example, the selling of stuff. Like, is there any tools inside of nonprofits HQ for that?
Yeah. So not currently. It is on the roadmap. Several customers have asked us for it. They want to be able to do auction items and things of that nature. And so we are building that in like e-shops. There's some like regulatory things to work through to deliver that functionality, which is why it's not there yet. But that is on the roadmap. And that like tooling to support all these different things, right? We're always going to be evolving. We have to evolve with our customers. So as they have these needs, we're going to have to do the hard work to figure out how to deliver this and get this functionality in a very clean, very legal way, right, to our customers. But yeah, like all nonprofits are businesses, right? They're registered as domestic nonprofit corporations in their states, right? They apply with an employer identification number to become tax exempt with the IRS. They are businesses. They just, nobody owns them and there are no shareholders, right? Nobody turns a profit. They still CEOs and executive directors still make salaries. They still it's very much a business.
I think that's a lot of misunderstanding to the public is, I've heard it, a Goodwill or Salvation Army that they're terrible because of their ratios and stuff. And it's like yes and no. Like there's so many nuances to the nonprofit back end. Now, I'm kind of curious on what other features in there. So, like you talked about the e-shops, like communicating to donors, communicating to people that they've served? Is there like tool sets inside of your product that will let them kind of do like what I'm thinking is in some ways you're kind of like the Uber for X. You're building like a HubSpot for nonprofits. Is kind of where it sounds like it's heading in some ways, but correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I would absolutely correct you if you were wrong, Leon. But no, so like that's, I think a HubSpot for nonprofits is a great way to start, right? It's a really good start. And what we're building is a platform that's tailored specifically to how nonprofits work and operate that provides all those useful tools. One of the upcoming features that we're really excited about this year are AI agent workforces, right? So we're calling them virtual volunteers. And what virtual volunteers are meant to do is kind of help out when you're short on people, right? Do you need to send a bunch of follow-ups? Do you need to do a bunch of mailings? Do you need to do any type of research on some program or look for regulatory requirements? All these different things that virtual volunteers will be able to take care of, tasks that are very definable, very repetitive, that don't have too much nuance from or differentiation between logical decision making, things that are, I guess I said it right, very definable and repeatable to help out, right, where you can save time. So your actual people, which are becoming harder and harder to find for nonprofits as well, your actual people are focused on the really big things that matter, that make that tangible.
The relationships, the donors, the
exactly.
impact with the homeless, whatever they're doing. That is interesting because it also goes into that, like, is the cost. Like a human might be a volunteer. It's hard to track those down, but also a human might be an employee.
Yep.
That's going to have a hard cost that's going to eat into, I don't know if you would call it profit, but it would eat into the revenue that then can be used to make an impact, even though that is part of the impact. That AI agent really becomes an accelerator. You could, in theory, like run 5 of them at a time, right? And, have something that a human would have taken a week, done in maybe a day or two, and man, that speeds up the impact. So not only do you become a revenue generator, become a compliance center, you've got a virtual-esque workforce. That
Absolutely.
is,
and that's what we're trying to create, right? We called ourselves in the beginning, and it was like we had this really ambitious pie in the sky idea that we would be everything a nonprofit needs, right, to operate. And that's how we started building this thing. And at first we had like a couple things that worked, right? And in true startup fashion. And as the platform matures, as the market matures, as we're working with larger and larger organizations, we're really getting a very deep understanding of the problems that our customers are facing, and we can use technology to continue adding to the platform to really create that everything you need to run your nonprofit. And virtual volunteers, you don't have to arrange transportation for them. You don't have to do background checks on them. You don't got to pay benefits or, you don't got to pay a salary. And it's all just there. They work 24 hours. You just got to pay a subscription fee. That's all. And, on that note, too, everything that exists on the platform and everything that we're adding, we're the first all-inclusive platform, right? So when you sign up to NonprofitsHQ, you get access to everything on the platform. There's no additional setup fees, no additional subscription charges for the virtual volunteers or the granting product or fundraising. You get it all. And that's really what we wanted to do, an easy way for organizations to become more efficient through our technology and focus more on their actual missions.
So you've got... It's an everything platform. In some ways, I don't want to call it an everything platform, but it's an everything for nonprofits. So you've got the CRM for donors. You've got the compliance CRM for whatever, the people that you're serving. You've got a revenue generator. You've got a virtual, somewhat free workforce, quote unquote free. Is that additional cost or is that baked into that?
It's baked in.
Okay, so I like that because I have heard, and I've been working with a lot of nonprofits doing Google Grants and helping them build websites. The big thing is it's kind of like those old school softwares where it's like, yes, they're virtual and they're softwares, but it's not an easy spin up. It's oh, hey, just like a VMware thing, oh, we got to spin up an instance and we're going to install it on this address. And by the way, there's a $3,500 setup fee, and this is your fee every month, and you got to plug in Twilio to do this and that. And all of a sudden, your cost goes from maybe $200 to $500 a month to $1,000 a month. And then when you get more people, they start charging you for contacts. Like that is in my mind, that's where nonprofit tech always kind of confused me, because I was like, how does a business be a business, but also do it in an ethical way? And you guys are definitely down the path.
Absolutely. And that's why, we have this general perception that if you're a for-profit company building for nonprofits, you're just there to take advantage. Mm-hmm. And when you charge a subscription fee and you charge a setup fee for this, one of our biggest competitors, you buy their products, say you buy their CRM, right? And you want to add fundraising. Cool, you can totally do that. So there's another setup fee and an additional monthly cost, right? Say you want to add board of directors management, or you want to add these different things. Like, if we're always nickeling and diming these organizations that are already struggling for funding to keep their programs going anyway, we are that unethical problem, right? And so that, combined with the fact that my generation doesn't like paying for fees, we wanted to build a platform that was easy. I want to know when I go buy something exactly what I'm going to pay and exactly how I'm going to pay that. And so we take those same principles. And ultimately, I think, our customers, that's kind of what they're looking for, is a little more transparency in what that pricing looks like too. Because especially when you're talking about virtual volunteers and things of that nature with these variable functionalities, you might buy the subscription, right? You might pay for the add-on to set up these things and pay an additional monthly fee. But then if you used too much of these virtual volunteers, you're paying again, right? And so if our entire business is built on putting our customers or putting these organizations in a position where they're trying to figure out how to pay us instead of put more money into their mission and serve the people that they're serving, that's a problem for me. And I think that's what's unethical.
That has always been a dilemma that I see in it. And I think, one, you're hitting it head on. You're talking through it. You've got a good sense of it. And then you are doing it in an ethical way. It's
and ethical.
Clear.
You said an ethical way, right?
In an ethical way.
Yeah.
not anti. But it makes, especially on the nonprofit side, and I've talked to a few nonprofits that have worked with you and you're using your software, it is almost like a night and day for them a lot of times. Like, they welcome that there's not an add-on fee, that this is there. But on your side, how does that look like for your business? Like, is there pressures? Do you have investors? Like, I think that's part of this. Is
Absolutely.
I believe that you're bootstrapped almost through and through, with minus some winning funds. But I think that's part of it, right?
Absolutely. So all of the money, so the shareholders are us, right? And that gives us the ability to really stick to our vision and really operate this the way we want. We can stay a super lean company, right? I know a lot of startups want to hire, open a bunch of offices, right? That creates a lot of overhead. We have the team in place to support our customers and to ensure that they have a smooth experience on the platform, and that's it, right? We don't need all these extraneous things and all these flashy, fancy things to operate. And so a lot of the majority of the revenue that we generate from subscriptions goes into the platform, into providing these functionalities. Because let's be honest, especially when you're working with and hosting AI, which is like we host our own models, that's not cheap, right? That's not cheap at all. But the fact that we are a for-profit company, if the need ever arises that we do need to generate or ingest a large amount of capital to support our platform or to bring in new features, we can do that. Right. I think from our perspective in terms of pricing, the revenue pricing is always hard, right? And we go back and forth and we play with those different modelings and projections almost daily.
Everyone will scream at us and say raise prices.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's going to be the through and through advice. Raise your prices.
Absolutely. And so many people have told us that too. But when you're thinking about it from the eyes of your customer, right? In our case is nonprofits, right? they need to direct as much money as possible into what they're doing. And we want to be able to help them with that. We want to provide the framework and the tooling for them to do that, to generate their revenue, to amplify their impact. And that comes with a cost, right? We have operational costs. And so our subscription fees should cover that, right? We're not trying to get rich off all of these nonprofits. That's not what we're doing. And so I think the fact that we are bootstrapped, we won a pitch competition, and so there's some dollars in from that. But they're not decision-making dollars either, right? We didn't give up a board seat. We didn't. We are still in control of the vision and the direction. And as long as that's the case, we're going to be able to build this in that ethical, easy-to-use way for our customers.
I love it. You see it too often. Just like, and I'm sure everyone's seen it on Twitter, is the bench accounting firm kind of falling apart. And I think that they're blaming a lot of the VCs. I don't know if it's fully true. I'm sure there's a bunch of back end, but when you take on money and you take on funding, you now have other people to answer to. And right now, if you can build it into a really great way, which you're doing, you get to a point where you've got a lot of leverage, you've got a lot of power, and say, hey, this is our brand, this is how we've done it. And that it's rare to see those types of businesses out there, because the trend is ingest money, scale, ingest more money, scale, exit. And it seems like you're trying to build a sustainable bootstrapped company that funds you and your team, and that is rare, exceedingly rare. And I love that more, because it's a calmer way. I think you don't always need all that capital. Sometimes you might, and if you need to go and adopt those models and roll them out, you could do it.
And the benefit, so we had a lot of support from Google startups as well, right? So we had a large amount of credits applied to our account that helped us pay for the expensive tech part of developing this and getting it out, right? So you can build businesses, and I think more business owners need to think about this. Instead of a lot of the programming and a lot of the resources that you have when you think about starting a business and when you jump into it, and a lot of the ecosystem, even here in San Antonio, kind of does this too. You start a business, you position it to raise capital, you go raise capital, you go a little longer, and then you exit, right? You get those returns and then you exit. I think we need to start thinking more about how we create self-sustainable business, how we start generating revenue early on. And because that allows us to do things like reasonable subscription prices and adding all this functionality at no cost, or no additional cost. And when we're in control of that vision, the company operates the way that we intended it to operate, right? And hopefully we know what we're doing. In this case, I think we do.
Yeah.
But like you said, anytime you bring on VC dollars, your focus kind of shifts from delivering a product that's meaningful and impactful to your customers to at least split, right? Maybe it doesn't shift completely, but at least splits to also delivering returns for those shareholders that just gave you a few $1 million,
and
right?
Often high multiples, 15, 20x,
Definitely.
It's big bets.
And when you have to do that, how do you do that? You raise your prices. You get super expensive software, and that's how you get, you get all these setup fees, you get all these usage gates and things like that on your platform.
A large sales team that has to be covered in all of that. Yep. Now, again, I've got some background knowledge. The one thing that we were talking about outside of this podcast was about a community platform. And everything I think that you've been talking about and describing and everything, I think a core part of it is a community. I'm curious, what does that look like and how does it play into the software?
Absolutely. So, when you introduce any type of software, well, first off, the nonprofit space is a very community-focused area, right? It's a very small area, too. If you operate or work in one nonprofit, you probably know or are good friends with or have worked with others across the country.
That is how I have fallen into working with so many nonprofits. The first one went to the second one. The second one said, hey, I'm a board member here. It is a very small world and a very very big country, but it's very small. It's very, very fascinating to me.
Absolutely. And because of that, you can naturally get people to participate in community-based things around the software and the tools that they're using. And so what we're building is a community platform that where all of our customers, all of nonprofit leaders can go to get resources, right? Whether that's strategy resources, how do you plan for next year's, what is a impact report template, things like that. Ask questions, get help, whether it's related to our software or just related to nonprofit operations. And what that's going to do is a couple of things, right? That's going to provide a way for our community or our members to find direct access to people that are experienced in doing exactly what they're trying to solve alongside them, right? In an easy way. And that's also going to provide us insight on the day-to-day challenges that our customers are providing. So we can start tackling some of these issues with technology as well. So for example, in this community, if we get, a lot of people that are trying to understand how to how to optimize a fundraising campaign. Maybe we build technology that builds optimized campaigns out of the box, right? Just as an example,
Yeah.
right? And so there's a lot that can be gained on both sides from having a community. But more than that, when you bring people together, you create a purpose, right? You create a way for their mission to be heard and for them to get help on amplifying that, right? And so that's what the Nonprofits HQ community is all about. It's not in production yet. We're going to be rolling that out in the next quarter.
Okay, it's 2025. We're recording on the 31st, so
yeah, true. Okay, I don't know when this will air, but it might be this quarter.
I love the community part because a lot of the nonprofit leaders, they came from a regular background. Some of them were working at. And I've seen it a few times. Like they've been working at, a water treatment plant, and then they were like, "Hey, there's so many issues here. I want to go do something on how to treat water and educate everybody." Instead, it's a nonprofit. They don't know anything about business. They don't know anything about raising money. They don't know anything about these business nonprofit parts. And a lot of times, it's really hard to plug into that community initially.
Right.
And if you can get a jump start to say, "Hey, there's a bunch of like-minded people, and hey, this is the problem. We got all these donations, and I need to deliver an impact report." What does an impact report look like?
What do you even include in an impact report? Is there some standard structure or what? Absolutely.
What are people often looking for? And somebody that's been doing it for 10 years is going to go, "Hey, I got a really great template. Here you go. These are the things that I've been asked for the most." If they ask for other stuff, you can say, "Hey, this is the most impactful." And obviously it changes nonprofit to nonprofit. But having a community, I think, is one of the most important parts, because whenever you're doing anything, whether you're a business owner, a nonprofit leader, or building anything in your life, a lot of times it gets very lonely. And that's a hard thing to fight, because you need to feel that kind of community impact and sense and doing good. And it's not so much a validation point, but just somebody kind of saying, "No, you are on the right path. Like, you are doing good beyond the people that you're impacting." Because sometimes you just
absolutely
you get doubts. I do all the time of like, am I doing the right thing? And then you go talk to somebody and they're like, "Oh yeah," and they push you in the right spot.
Absolutely. And that directly is how we got to where we are. When I first had conversations with friends, with people that I know in like the tech space, with different people about what we were building, the two most common responses that I got was, "That will never make money. You're not going to be able to build a sustainable business because nonprofits are poor." And the second one was, "Well, why don't you just do that for for-profit companies?" Like, those are the two biggest, even initially some of the mentorship-based conversations that we had were along those lines too. And they're like, "Oh, well, that's great, but are you going to pivot to serve more for-profit companies?" And we were able to take that through the mentorship that we found here at Geekdom and various different other places, but we were able to find other people that are building at a similar stage, and we were able to talk through these things and be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, check some of the stuff that we're thinking, but get that additional, they told you you're crazy too and you're not going to go anywhere, so maybe this is normal, right? And maybe we are crazy. I think you have to be at least a little bit crazy to start a company." And just the amount of risk involved, right? You have to have a large appetite for risk, but other people building in similar places that people said were crazy, that you're never gonna go anywhere, that that community is what helps us all be crazy together while we're building our companies, right?
100%.
And that's no different for, like you were saying, the nonprofit space, right? All of these people are making positive change in their communities, but they still need, you still got to take care of the people that are doing it too, those change makers. They need support. They need help from others, and community is a really good way to do that.
Yes. And really a nonprofit, even the volunteers they see a problem and they address it. It's just like if you see trash outside your neighborhood, sooner or later it's like, hey, we're getting together a group, and that group turns into something bigger that turns into a nonprofit, and then the people are like, how do we grow this? Like we need and talking through those things. Last question for you of this, and it's a little bit more of timely question. It is December 31st. I almost said January 31st. It's December 31st. We're heading into 2025. Two parts of this question. One is...
It's never just a last question.
No. It's never just the last question. We could talk for hours, I'm sure.
Yep. We often do.
Yes. The first part of the question is, what does 2025 look for Nonprofits HQ? And then I'll follow up on that.
Yeah, so we're going to continue to move full steam ahead, right? We're identifying problems, we're understanding problems. Mm-hmm. We're talking with our customers, with organizations that aren't our customers, understanding what these problems are and using technology to build it. So that looks like, tangibly, that's introduction of a large amount of features. Towards the end of Q1, we're having a large product kickoff announcement type of event. And that kind of sets the tone for it. We're excited for, the roadmap and for the functionality that we're going to drive, and we're excited to expand our partnerships with various different consultants and funders in the nonprofit space.
Amazing. Now, the second part of the question is 2025 for you. Any sage advice you want to give to folks wanting to build or starting to build or doing anything, whether it's a startup or a nonprofit?
Definitely. So I think a lot of what I hear, so I do a lot of mentorship just in general for startups and for organizations. And so what I hear most as a blocker for getting started is, I don't have people, I don't have money, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I hear. And yes, I understand that things need money sometimes to go, but most people's idea of what an organization is or what a startup is a little skewed because of, the Shark Tanks and the YCs and all of these things. You don't need $20 million to build a company. And so I think the two biggest pieces of advice that I regularly hand out and that I would echo here again today is, one, just get started, right? Do something and get it in front of customers, even if it's ugly. The first MVP, and I don't know if I ever showed you those screenshots, or I think we have a couple video walkthroughs, but the first MVP of our product. Now, my entire background has been in software engineering, mostly on the back end, right? And so I designed our UIs and UX for the initial platform. And, we got it out in front of customers super early to get their feedback, so we knew that everything we were building actually made sense. And some of the most common feedback was, wow, this is a really cool idea. I think we could use it, but it's really ugly and it's really hard to use. So make it less ugly and make it easier to use. And we were like, well, damn, we thought it was. And then so we brought in people, or we worked with people that had those skill sets. But my point is, our UIs cost me a few beers, right? A friend that is a UI UX designer designed them while we were having some beers, and I picked up the check, right? And so you don't need to go hire a large engineering team. You don't need to go hire a big design company to build, especially an MVP. So every quarter I host this MVP in a day workshop where we bring in startup founders or nonprofit leaders that are non-technical, and we teach them how to use tools to build their mobile apps or build their applications. You don't have to hire a bunch of super expensive people. I'm a recovering software engineer. I know how expensive we are, and it's unnecessary for early stage startups and for early organizations. So get something out there, get it in front of customers or in front of your benefactors if you're a nonprofit as quickly as possible, and get early feedback. But also, don't think that your goal is raising funding or securing a big grant, right? Because you have to sustain yourself, whether it's a company or an organization, a nonprofit, you have to sustain yourself beyond that round of funding. And a lot of people, their goal becomes that first check-in. Yeah. And then you hit that goal and you're like, oh, okay, well, now what do we do? I guess we'll keep going and we'll spend this money, right? But your goal, that first check-in, or whether it's revenue or whether it's investment or whether it's a grant, that first check-in is a tool to get you where you want to go, right? How many people do you want to impact in your first year? How many customers do you want to have? Whatever those metrics are, that's your goal, and that's what you should be fighting for. Everything else needs to fall in line. And the three things that I always say, and my co-founder and I, Alberto, and our team, we kind of go back and forth on this a lot, because this is one place where I don't budge. Every single thing that we need to do needs to move our people forward, our company forward, or our products forward, or all of them, right? If it doesn't fall into one of those categories, we don't need to be doing it, at least not right now. Maybe in the future we will. But we don't need to be doing that right now. And I think if you approach everything with that kind of mindset, you're going to always be focused on the right things and moving in the direction that your organization or your company needs to move in.
Everything said, 100% agree with. The small add-on is getting started could be as simple as a landing page and an email list.
Yep.
Like, it doesn't even have to progress that far initially.
That's
if
true.
You can get 10, 15 people and start interviewing them. I think the one thing through this whole interview that I have heard from you and that I've pulled out for anybody listening is you talking to customers. That is the biggest part, and I think if you start building, very easy to get to talking to customers with that list and
definitely. And that also shows, like, that gives you some early validation on your idea or what you're doing. Idea or what you're doing as well. I think I said idea. Yeah. But yeah, so like, if I had an idea of what I wanted our platform to be when we first started this company. It's not anything like what that idea was, right? And if I would have stuck with that without talking to customers and then writing code while talking to customers, I would have this really cool product that I really like, and I would be my customer. Yeah. Right? I would be the person that I was serving. So that goes nowhere. And so that's a really good point. Talk to customers, and it is as simple as a landing page. I know when we first put our very first marketing website up, we had a little landing page, and it had a form that initially didn't work, and we were trying to figure out why we weren't getting people signing up for our list, right? And it's because the form just didn't submit. We found out, but the point is that little simple thing, right? Once we fixed the form, that's how we got in contact outside of the people, directly through our network. That's how we started reaching out to and connecting with people in the space, whether they're a volunteer or an executive director or a CEO of a nonprofit, right? Because our platform, it's meant to make the organization more efficient. But it's not just that executive director or that CEO that's using it, right? Volunteers use it to find and sign up and confirm for shifts, right? Donors use it to manage year-end tax forms and receipts for their donations, right? So you can't just talk to one type of group that you want to serve. You got to make sure that you understand what they're looking for and what they need all around. And then what that did for us? It was slower to build, but we had customers when we launched. Yeah. That's what that did for us.
That's an important part too.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you coming in. For everybody listening, I'll put the link to NonprofitsHQ. I'll link your LinkedIn and put your information. Really appreciate everybody listening, and again, thank you for coming on The Boost.
Absolutely. The Boost is super cool, and I'm always eager to jump on and have conversations with you, Leon.